Okay, we are back with another technique tutorial. Today's topic is the heel-toe technique. Last week we had John Longstreth teaching the heel-toe technique at the Drum Sneak Academy. So right now I want to share the 3 big takeaways from that lesson with all of you. Alrighty, so let's start with the first clip of John Longstreth and the do's and don'ts when it comes to the heel-toe technique.
One of the things I'm going to cover immediately off the top here is the do's and don'ts. The do's and don'ts of it really tie into a couple of things. When people talk about the double stroke technique on the feet, I feel like, judging by the kinds of questions they're asking, is they're looking for a fast track method to blazing double bass at 260 and above for, 12 bars without interruption. And while that will happen eventually, it did take me 3 months working about 3.5 hours, 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday. It took about 3 months before I was able to use it for the first time in the rehearsals and the recordings that created Antithesis by Origin. So there was a lot of work going into doing it. Now, granted, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was doing a lot of problem solving. I was coming up with an idea and then killing it, coming up with another idea and then killing it. There was a point in time where I was just like, well, hell with it. I'll just do a press roll on the kick drum and put 2 triggers on each kick drum to heighten the sensitivity of the trigger and see how that works. Didn't work. And as I got to doing this technique and having it work during practice and eventually having it work during the album recording, I was finding out that I was doing what a lot of people have been calling either the double bounce or I don't really know what they call it. It's the version that everybody has in mind when they say things like, that guy's fast, but he's playing doubles. But I think what happened was a lot of people started seeing the double stroke as a thing where you could mush the beater into the head and just operate off of the bounce. And while I was doing that in the beginning, it developed all kinds of trouble once I got out on the road and realized that while you can push your beaters into the head and kind of get that, you can do that. You can do that with E-kits, with foot blasters, with on-triggers, I imagine, and a rolling kick head, I assume. But that became really problematic, as what I was dealing with that kind of situation was I'm dealing with the joint between, I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a hindrance here, but the joint between the kick drum and the pedal. And when there's this constant pressure pushing in, you're creating kind of almost this really flexible, it's a really weak joint. So if I would be on a stage that was soft and there would be that flexing going on between the kick drum and the pedal, what you were dealing with right there is you're dealing with a difference. You're dealing with a different space for these pedal-based triggers to connect with. So if I set up the pedal trigger on a concrete floor, which is the best thing you can do, and set it perfectly, we would use a sheet of cardstock, like construction paper or whatnot, to set the E-kits back in the early 2000s. But if I got onto a stage that was really flexible, and it would cause the E-kit to bury into the receiver, and then you'd get double trigger. So it ended up being really difficult to get a consistent technique on this. So what I started doing after my first tour with this was going home, and the idea was to slow it down and really develop that second note.
So the big takeaways from that clip are: number 1, no buzz roll. So actually John is really taking care that his notes are evenly spaced, and the second note, especially the second hit, is loud as well. And the second big tip is, and I never heard that mentioned anywhere, is that you have to be careful about this area of the bass drum. So basically, if you're on a drum riser that's shaky and that's flexible, you're gonna have a hard time with that kind of buzz roll. So it's vitally important that you got a stable, solid underground. So if you're on a drum riser, this kind of joint here and this special kind of movement can lead to force triggering, and we don't want that. All right, now let's watch the second clip where John talks about the most important factor when it comes to even double strokes.
What I started doing when I got back home from that first tour, which was kind of a nightmare but a good learning experience, was I really started to slow it down, and I really started to focus on this motion here. So that became really important. And I spent a lot of time just doing that. And anybody that works on the ankle lifting, you know, it's right down here in the calf. There's a lot of this motion. It's a very similar feeling right in here, kind of, maybe even up a little bit. But another thing is it's also at the very front of the shin, just below the knee, is another point that I need to make with some of the questions that were asked is burn is something. You're looking for a burn. You're not looking for stabbing, ripping, tearing pain. If that happens, then you need to stop, obviously. But if it burns just like walking, I mean, that's kind of what I get. If I walk for an hour on tour or anywhere, I will start to feel a burn somewhere in my legs, especially because I'm not in training shape. I'm in tour shape, which is kind of not in shape. So this motion, very important. Just to train my foot to be strong on that downstroke. One of the things I was able to get just kind of going through the filter of it after a while, I realized that this was the motion, which is the same as this. So, oh, cool. That works. Look at that. So I started doing that, coming back, coming back, coming back. As I was doing this is back in the Derek Roddy message board days, and I'm sure some of you were there for that. We were talking about this, and yes, slamming your heels into the ground was a part of it at the time, in the very beginning. It's not quite there so much anymore. I do feel like, since I've switched over to these ACD pedals, which have the lowest hinge point.
So here are the two big takeaways from that second clip. Number one, try not to get a bus roll as end result. No, you want to focus on the second stroke and the up motion from your heel by quick contraction of your calf muscle. So the second stroke also has the same volume, almost the same volume as the first one, and you're gonna end up with an open roll. Okay, and the second big takeaway, if you are working on a new technique like the heel toe technique, you're gonna learn something new, you're gonna get tired. Muscle fatigue is okay at the end of the session or at the next day, but one thing that is not okay is a stabbing feeling. So you don't want to hurt yourself, be careful. And again, I can't give you any medical advice, so if you feel any kind of pain, go see a doctor. Alrighty, and now let's continue with clip number 3 from John Longstreth.
So the big thing was to develop this thing here. And now there's a couple of methods on developing that, which I'll get into in a couple of seconds. But really what I tried to do for the longest time, to answer another question, how long? Now, I believe 100% in two schools of thinking. I do believe, number one, that speed is a byproduct of control. I think that the more you can control this thing, the safer you can push the speed. Someone else said speed is not a byproduct of control, but speed is a product of speed. If you push your body fast enough, it will eventually catch up with how fast your brain wants to go, and that is true as well. But control first. First control. Please control the damn thing first. Control the thing, and then you can push the speed all you want. I do believe that 20 minutes of focused practice is much better than 3 hours of jamming and kind of messing around and getting frustrated and giving up on something and trying something else. That, of course, works great too. But I also believe that sitting down for 3 hours and focusing on 3 different things, 4 different things for 3 hours and being focused, giving yourself breaks and all that is important too. So how long? My favorite is a good 10, 20 minutes of constant motion. Does not have to be the double stroke motion. It can be, if you're going to work on double strokes, I feel like it should be these two exercises right here. And they're both, you're not going to stop moving because you're always branching off of this. So you're always working. The whole double stroke technique for me is built off of that kind of, depending on how you count it, either eighth notes or 16th notes. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So what I tried to do is drop that heel at will. And the first thing I made were groupings of threes. Okay, cool. So now I can drop the heel at will. Interesting. So that allowed me just to build threes. And then I just started spamming threes a lot.
Big takeaway right here, control is more important than speed, especially if you're first starting out. Take your time, start practicing at slow tempos, focus on the upstroke, lifting the heel, contraction of the calf muscle to get an even double stroke roll. Alright, and that's it for today's lesson. If you want to check out John's full 1-hour lesson, then just sign up at drumtechniqueacademy.net. You can find the full lesson in our bonus section of the membership zone and also in our closed Facebook group. And that's it for today. Have a great day. Cheers from Vienna. Bye bye.